Today is the 19th of April. Now, typically tax day is on the 15th, right? But with the holiday and such, it was extended to the 18th. And if you're bounding up in bed right now realizing you didn't file, Luis Garcia is here from the IRS to tell you you can relax and how to handle it. Good morning, Luis.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you? You take the rest of the year off now, or how's this work?
Oh, no, I just got to catch up on everything else that I've been putting out for the past 6 months.
Right. 6 months dedicated to preparing for tax day and the rest of the year and everything else.
Right.
So if I suppose there is someone out there who missed the deadline and is just now discovering it, what happens now?
Well, if you are like almost 75% of people in Michigan, you don't owe the IRS. You are owed by the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, no problem. We'll keep your money. Unfortunately, if you don't file your well, people a lot of times say, you guys know how much I owe or know how much you owe me. Why don't you just send me the check? And the thing is, the way our tax system works is you have to file a return because we don't know whether you've had cash income or whether you've had a divorce or whether you've had more children or whatever your situation is. So until we get that tax return, that's when we figure out how much we owe you. And if you're, like I said, you're like the almost 80% of people in Michigan, you're going to get a refund. Now, if you file if you don't file and you owe, well, get to filing, or at least get to writing a check. But if you don't file and we owe you, the problem is you're not getting your money.
Yeah.
So file it as soon as you can. Remember, if you're owed by the IRS, you're in no trouble at all. You're not going to pay any fines. There's not going to be any fees, anything like that. The problem is you're not getting your money. But for the people that do owe, what we say is send us, and we say, well, if you don't know what it is, put together an estimation, do a rough sketch, send us as much as you can, then file in a 1040. An extension of file, which is a 4868. You do it right from the IRS website for free, right online, and send us that, and we'll give you an extra 6 months. Put your paperwork together, and then file. And then if you sent us too much money, we'll send it back. Whatever the overage is, we'll send it back to you. Or if you didn't send us enough, we're going to tack on some interest and penalties. But as long as you sent us the chunk of the majority of it, it shouldn't be too heavy of a fine. But the main thing is keep up on your documents, because that will help get this tax day going a lot smoother. Because filing your taxes now is basically data entry. Whether you're doing it with a computer and tax software, or whether you're working with a tax professional. The software or the tax professional is doing all the work for you. The days of sitting down with a stack of IRS books and a calculator and a bunch of pencils, those days are over. So you still have to assemble all your documents. So just make it easier for yourself. Keep them all in one place.
All right. You said Form 4868.
Right, and you can do that right online. It's an application for automatic extension of time to file U.S. individual income tax. Go to irs.gov, click on the free file, and the filing of the Form 4868 is totally free.
Okay.
So just file it electronically, and you get an automatic 6 months.
We're with Luis Garcia of the Internal Revenue Service. Yesterday was the tax deadline, so we're starting out today talking about what to do if you did not make it. Coming up in a few minutes, we'll talk about the latest scams. It seems that scam artists continue to use the name IRS as a lever to try and get you to part with your money and do so illegally. And Luis will help us with reminders about how to tell whether or not somebody who says they're with the IRS and you owe and send the money is legit or not. That's coming up in a moment on 95.3 WBCK. We're here with Luis Garcia of the Internal Revenue Service, and there, Luis, just in the break time there, we had a caller who said, okay, so explain it to me again. If I file an extension today, am I penalized?
It depends. Do we owe you money? Then no, you're not going to be penalized. Okay. Do you owe the IRS money? Then you already owe a day's worth of interest for not filing and not paying. So what we tell people is pay first if you're going to use the extension, if you're going to owe, pay first, and then figure out if you are owed money back and file that return as soon as you can. But for the majority of people, no, you will not be penalized if you file an extension to file. The worst thing is a failure to file penalty is much worse than failure to pay. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. If you don't file your tax return and you don't pay, that can be up to 5% a month, up to 25%, which is huge.
Wow.
Whereas if you don't pay, but you do file, it's 1% a month, up to 5%. So big difference, and that's because we want you to file more. We want the incentive to be more that you file your taxes than you pay your taxes, because we just, and there's all kinds of programs, by the way, if you can't pay, where we can adjust what you owe or give you a payment plan. There's really all sorts of ways that the IRS is going to work with you if you have any difficulty at all paying.
Okay, and that's good to know. So when you say send something, send some kind of a payment. So, if you owe $1,000 and I send you a check for $10, is that enough?
Well, it's a sign that you're trying.
Yeah,
absolutely. If people are worried that there's going to be some sort of major repercussions, it's the fees and penalties that add up. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door or anything like that, unless there's fraud involved. But for most people, it's, they overextended themselves, or they took money out of a retirement account when they were strapped. And then it's kind of a double whammy, because you're strapped for money, so you dip into your retirement account, and then you get hit with all these taxes, but you're strapped for money.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, talk to us, ask for help. We will help you. Burying your head in the sand and trying to avoid the problem is only going to make it worse. People don't understand most people don't understand how many different programs there are out there to help people pay their taxes, even going to the point of saying, we're going to cut a huge chunk off and reduce your tax burden. A lot of times you might see people who are maybe a little not so on the up and up, who claim to know all these secret techniques to cut your tax bill and pay only pennies on the dollar. Well, those programs are real, but you can do them yourself. Just go to irs.gov, look up offer and compromise. If you qualify, you don't need to pay somebody thousands of dollars. You can just do it yourself. And if your personal financial situation is such that you can't pay your tax bill and there is no foreseeable higher income in the future, we will reduce that tax bill. So if you owe $1,000, but we can see that you're never going to be able to pay that back, we can reduce it down to, 200 or 100.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think sometimes a lot of folks tend to freeze when they're in this kind of situation and get scared and don't act. You're saying just speak up and we will help. And that's probably the best, if you pick up anything out of this conversation, that might be the best thing to hear. We're with Luis Garcia, the Internal Revenue Service. When we come back in a minute, we'll talk about how that fear of the IRS is what some scam artists will use to try and get into your wallet, because they know you're scared about that stuff. And we'll talk about some of the scams that are out there now. You probably see, hear, or read stories about this almost on a daily basis. We'll get to that in just a second. A few more minutes with Luis Garcia at the Internal Revenue Service. Boy, it really is remarkable, Luis, how I see stories almost daily about some kind of scam that invokes the IRS name in order to be successful.
Yeah, the criminals know that when they hear IRS, there's not exactly warm and cuddly feelings. And what they do is they try to leverage that into first establishing their authority or their legitimacy, that they really are the IRS, and then they try to get you to click over to your panicked brain and stop thinking. So what they'll do is they'll threaten you. They'll say they're going to, if you're elderly, they say they're going to take your driver's license. If you're in an immigrant community, they say they're going to deport you. If you're, average person, well, the cops are coming to knock on your door and they're going to put you in jail. And so they tell you a lot of information that you think only the IRS knows. Social security numbers, your children's names, all sorts of information that you think is private, but is actually out there from different sources that they're able to tap into. So you think, well, wow, this is really the IRS. Then they tell you owe an amount of money that isn't out of this world. Maybe it's a couple $1,000s. Maybe it's a couple hundred. But what they do is they panic you with the threat. The cops are coming. We're going to put you in jail. We're going to foreclose on your home. And then you think, wow, I've got to pay this off. You stop thinking, and the only thing in your mind is, I've got to take care of this right away. Mm-hmm. So remember the 3 red flags. One is, no matter what you have heard, no matter what you have seen on TV, no matter what people have told you, the IRS will never threaten you. It is illegal for us to threaten you. We will lose our jobs. We will go to jail if we threaten the taxpayer. So IRS will never threaten you. The IRS will never ask for immediate payment. We're never going to say pay within 24 hours or you're going to jail. And we're never going to say you have to pay by a particular method. The one that is the most popular now is iTunes cards. The IRS does not collect taxes on iTunes cards. As funny as it sounds, but, when you're panicked, when you're not thinking straight, you think, wow, this is maybe some new tax collection method. Uh-huh. You're not thinking straight. So we've been very lucky that there have been clerks at a lot of the stores where people buy iTunes cards that have stopped people before they've actually paid these criminals off. So please remember, IRS is never going to threaten, never going to demand immediate payment, and the IRS is never, ever going to tell you to pay by a particular way. If you want to pay in cash, you can pay in cash. If you want to pay by check, it's fine. Whatever you want, we'll take the money. We just wanted the revenue to keep the country running. But don't, when somebody says you have to pay this way or that way, that's another red flag that it's not really the IRS. But don't fall for it. Don't antagonize them. Just hang up on them. And please report them to the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. It's TIGTA.gov, and they're the agency that's tasked with hunting these guys down and shutting them down. And they did a great job last year and found a big operation overseas that was taking millions and millions of dollars. But just remember, no threats, no immediate payment, and we're never going to tell you to say to pay a particular way.
Well, hats off to all of those investigators who have that job, and hats off to those cashiers who are alert enough to realize that some people think that they have to get those iTunes cards, and they say, no, you don't. Wow. That's above and beyond the call of duty.
It really is. And there was at one point where they were really kind of our and they were, volunteers. They weren't trained by the IRS or anything. They were just sort of the last line of defense when they see the little old lady buying iTunes cards, and they're like, I don't think that lady has a cell phone or an iPod. What is she doing buying iTunes cards? Uh-huh. And they figured out that these poor people were being scammed.
Like detective work. Wow.
Yeah.
So if there's any litmus test, I think you said it, the IRS will not tell you got to pay right now and go get the money right now.
Right. And that's one of the techniques that these scam artists use, because they know the second you get off the phone, you're going to call your husband or your wife, you're going to call your accountant, your attorney, so they've gotten to the point now where they don't want you to get off the phone. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, if you talk to anybody else, we are going to, foreclose on your house.
Oh, boy.
If you tell anybody this is a special one-time only deal, you owe $10,000, but we're only going to make it $8,000 today. But if you tell anybody, and they'll keep you on the phone. They'll say, put it on speakerphone. We'll wait while you get dressed. We'll wait. And there's people who have had their phone on the whole time talking to these scam artists as they drive to the store to go buy a gift card to send them thousands of dollars.
Unbelievable. Don't believe it. Be suspicious. Hang up. Report it, and talk to the IRS, because, as Luis says, if you're in that situation where you owe, they're ready to help you, and they're not going to threaten you.
And let me add one small little caveat. Yeah. Remember, the IRS may call you. It's very rare, but we do call people. And we actually just started Congress had us contract with the collection agency. So now there is a collection agency working on behalf of the IRS collecting taxes. But they will not threaten, they will not demand immediate payment, and they will not make you pay in a particular way.
All right. Remember that. That's where we'll leave it. Thank you, Luis. We always appreciate the information.
My pleasure.
Luis Garcia with the Internal Revenue Service.